I really enjoyed the first Frozen when it came out. Like everyone else, I thought the teaser trailer for the first film was promising another lowbrow animated feature that we collectively forget about after a few months, but 2013's Frozen blew everyone away with its engaging story and music. Up until the first Frozen, I was not a huge fan of musicals as a genre, but something about the composition and integration of Frozen's score into the story broke through my apathy for musicals, and I now really enjoy them. Unlike the teaser trailer for the first Frozen, Frozen 2's teaser was dramatic and engaging. I was really excited for the second film and interested to see where the movie would go. The wise choice to use a less replayed song than Let It Go, the color palette, and the redesigned costumes with fascinating set pieces all boded well for the new film. Unfortunately, for me at least, these elements fell short of what I hoped for and left me feeling very mixed about Frozen 2. My dad and one of my younger brothers are very good at predicting how a movie is going to end, while I, the filmmaking degree holder, can barely do this at all. It's incredibly annoying, but what this ultimately means is that if a movie is going and even I start to piece together the ending, your movie is really, really predictable. Within the first 20 minutes of Frozen 2, it was already obvious that the unprovoked battle between the Northuldra tribe and the Arendelle army was going to turn out to be a ruse, and the Arendelle army would be antagonists with the Northuldra being innocent. I mean, when's the last time a developed society discovering an undeveloped society in a movie ever had the developed side portrayed as anything but antagonists? The film also gave us a pretty large, annoying hint that Elsa was going to abdicate her throne at the end of the film almost immediately, with Elsa singing in Into the Unknown, "Deep down, I'm not where I'm meant to be." Close to half an hour into the film, we are introduced to the myth of a fifth spirit who bridges the spiritual and mortal planes of existence. Even with the weird and poorly conveyed mythology, more on that in a second, my first thought was more or less, so, is that spirit going to be Elsa? Most of these elements were not 100% clear to me. I'd certainly categorize them more as speculation than confident conclusions, but the fact that they came to mind so easily was more than a little annoying, especially given the great twist of the first Frozen, where what we thought was the main villain turned out to be a red herring. Of course, predictability is not necessarily a bad thing. Captain America: The First Avenger is one of my favorite movies, and it's very predictable, with a classic protagonist arc and a simple storytelling. The only thing is, Captain America is going somewhere good. I don't mind predictability if it's going somewhere that makes sense for the characters, and somewhere that's interesting and fun. Frozen 2 often doesn't do that. Take the fact that everything about Elsa screams aristocracy, while Anna screams freedom and fun-loving attitude. It's true that Anna shows a great love for her people, especially in the spin-off shorts like Olaf's Frozen Adventure, but Elsa is clearly the queen. The only reason Elsa ever shirked her throne before, in the first film, was because she was literally afraid she would kill everyone by staying. And that fear never stopped Elsa's resolve to accept her role as queen, or even made Elsa consider abdicating to Anna during all her years of worrying about her powers. It seems really disingenuous to me to take a character who's so clearly prepared to be a ruler and make them throw it away forever, after an hour of loose character development. When I heard Elsa's line from Into the Unknown, my heart sank because I guessed they would make Elsa abdicate. I'm a man who likes complicated plots and a lot of exposition. I genuinely enjoy intricate movies with weird rules like Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, or crisscrossing time travel stories like the stuff Stephen Moffat wrote for Doctor Who. I am definitely pro-complicated storytelling, but by the first 5 minutes of Frozen 2, I had already lost the thread of the plot. We were given multiple long, confusing names. I had to Google the name of that tribe above to write it, and a bunch of exposition which left me very confused about how many spirits and characters we were talking about, and who or what they belonged to. What's worse is that by the end of the film, I was still unclear where everything fit and why people behaved the way they did. I was unclear why Anna and Elsa's mother was so important to the Northuldra tribe. I was unclear how Elsa, who was born presumably 20 or so years ago, could be some eternal bridge spirit. And I was unclear whether Gale and the water horse spirit were one of the 4 elemental spirits introduced in the film, or just generic spirits of the forest and ocean. It'll probably become clearer once I rewatch the film, but I really shouldn't have to. And if I'm confused, I know parents who went to this movie with their kids were confused as well, and that might not impact their enjoyment, but it did mine. It's no secret that a large contingent of people wanted Elsa to be made explicitly a homosexual for the second Frozen, and it should be equally clear that many families would not have been on board if Disney had decided to go that route, perhaps even boycotting the film or telling their kids they couldn't go see it. Given that the first Frozen became the highest-grossing animated film of all time, Disney had to ensure that they could keep both parts of the market interested, lest they lose their ability to sell more merchandise. Therefore, in order to avoid angering either side, Elsa had to stay single, without any clear romantic interest of any gender. To build up to this, in the opening flashback of the film, we see that even as a child, Anna is a romantic who loves marriage and romance, while Elsa is less than enthralled. This retroactive continuity change creates a clearer divide between the sisters' interests, and helps the audience disassociate Elsa from the idea of romance. This builds to Elsa's quasi-spiritual or demigod role as the bridge later in the film, which seems to be a pretty clear calling or vocation which isn't compatible with marriage and family. While I don't like the move, I have to admit that it's clever. Disney completely sidesteps their dilemma while allowing the people who wanted Elsa to be a lesbian to just keep imagining her as one. I don't think it was a good or wise move, but I do think it was a clever business strategy. Still, character-wise, I think Elsa should have stayed the queen. It just seems like more her thing. Anna happens to be royalty, but Elsa is royalty. Of course, Disney may throw all of this out the window and make someone from the Northuldra tribe Elsa's girlfriend in a theoretical third film. For those of you who didn't watch Once Upon a Time at all, or quit after season 2, salutations. But for those of you who did stick with it, you might remember that Once Upon a Time brazenly turned their 4th season into Frozen fanfiction, and staged their own little Frozen 2 back in 2014. One of the decisions Once Upon a Time made was that Anna and Elsa's parents were on a secret mission regarding Elsa's powers, which is the same route that Frozen 2 decided to go. I have no idea if the creators of Frozen shared their plans for the sequel with Once Upon a Time's team, or if Frozen 2 ripped off Once Upon a Time, or if the idea is just so obvious that both writers thought of it independently. I don't really have a comment about this similarity, it just weirds me out and I needed to share it. You'll notice I haven't mentioned Kristoff much in this review. That's because the movie doesn't either. Kristoff's arc is a slight wavering about whether to ask Anna to marry him with wacky hijinks as he tries to propose, that altogether felt way too sitcom-y. It was a waste of Kristoff's character and it was disappointing. It would have been one thing if Kristoff had stayed behind to guard Arendelle while its 2 surviving royalty left on their adventure. That would have been kind of interesting since it would have been sort of like Kristoff is replacing the role that Hans had in the first movie and is taking over that responsibility. Obviously this wouldn't work because Kristoff and Anna would want to stay together, but at least there would have been something practical for Kristoff to do instead of just generally have anxiety, which is all he did in the second film. At the start of this rambling, I said that Frozen made me start to take musicals seriously, so this section of my review is by far the part I am most disappointed to talk about. If the songs were good, I would have left the theater much more pleased with Frozen 2, but the fact is that these songs are just not as impactful as the majority of the songs from the first film. All Is Found was great, as was Into the Unknown, and Lost in the Woods was okay. All in all though, I was really disappointed with the selection when there were so many instant hits in the first Frozen. It's not just that the second installment was lacking musically, it's that it was also lacking lyrically or thematically. A good musical's songs, like many good dialogue scenes, tell us about the characters and what they're feeling or wanting in a unique way that only a musical can. They don't have to, of course, but it really helps the audience endear themselves to that particular song and to the movie as a whole. I'm still moved when I hear Do You Want to Build a Snowman because it's a really engaging song when combined with the narrative, what with the abrupt falling of the sisters and the death of their family. Or you have the inverse of that with Anna's Coronation Day, a song talking about her hopes and ambitions as she finally gets to interact with society and other people, while at the same time leading into Elsa's first song about her fears of ruling the kingdom, while keeping her dangerous powers a secret. Then you have Frozen 2. While the newer film does try to do similar things as the first, it doesn't do them as well because the needs of the characters aren't as compelling or interesting. A major part of Into the Unknown is the line which tells us that Elsa is afraid of her powers growing stronger, but that sort of feels like a worse version of what the first film had. In the first Frozen, Elsa expresses her fear about her powers being too much to contain, either in the kingdom or away in the mountains, which she sings about in For the First Time in Forever and it's reprised later in the film. But the whole point of the first movie is Elsa learning that she doesn't have to be afraid of her powers when she has the love of her sister, and Elsa learns she can stay and rule her home without fear. That's her entire arc in the first film, so when the second film reverses that and tells us that Elsa is afraid again, it just feels unnecessary and contrived. The inversion of this is Anna's song The Next Right Thing, which should really be easy to knock out of the park, because it follows a genuinely sad moment with Olaf's death. But the melody is so bland that it isn't sad or emotionally stirring so much as boring. This was frustrating enough while watching the film, but when I later looked up the soundtrack on Spotify, I got even more frustrated as I discovered the deleted songs which were not included in the finished movie, but some of which were voiced by the principal cast for whatever reason. These songs made me angry because they helped better justify the choices I felt were just bad or unwarranted decisions throughout the film. The song Home by Kristen Bell as Anna was especially annoying because of how good it was. With the exception of Into the Unknown and All Is Found, Home is the best song on the soundtrack with its peppy and stringy quality, and its important place lyrically in the rest of the film. Not only does it sound great, but Home fills the assorted noticeable gaps in the released version of the film. Immediately prior to Some Things Never Change, Anna says she's happy because she's not alone anymore. The sentiment is perfectly fine, but I thought the way she said it sounded a little off. And when I listened to the deleted songs, I realized why. That line is a callback to the lyrics of Home, when Anna says basically the same thing. So obviously Home was the original introduction song, or the song that was supposed to precede Some Things Never Change. I also mentioned a few minutes ago that I didn't feel like Anna was suited to be queen or to royal life, and while I still don't, Home makes a really strong effort to prove me wrong, which is more than I can say for the rest of the movie. In Home, Anna sings aloud, "I breathe in this place I live and wonder what else can I give this home." And later in the song she expresses how she wants to give her family more than she currently is of her time and effort. Lyrics like these make Anna's becoming queen the answer to the question she's asking at the start of the film in this song, and it gives Anna a slightly more compelling arc than the non-arc the actual movie gives her. Honestly, if I could change only one thing about the entire film, it would be that Home would stay in the movie so that Anna's becoming queen makes a little more sense. The other outtakes also feature interesting additions to the character dynamics, like Unmeltable Me really emphasizing the growth of Elsa's power as the reason that Olaf doesn't need the flurry over his head from the first movie, although not all the deleted songs are that stellar, with Kristoff's Get This Right being pretty terrible. I wanted to compare the ensemble songs between Frozen 1 and 2 as well, but I've already talked long enough about this section, so let's move on to the things I actually liked about the movie. I bashed this movie for longer than I wanted to above, although believe it or not I actually cut some sections. I highly doubt very many people will make it this far in the review. That said, I owe it to the film to mention the good things it did. It was very funny. I wasn't the biggest fan of Olaf in the first Frozen, but this time around he got a lot of great lines, especially from psychology and philosophy, for reasons that amuse but escape me. The way the film used Sven to mess with people who didn't like how the reindeer and Kristoff were portrayed in the first film is also hilarious. There are several innuendo shots, like where it looks like Kristoff is proposing to Sven, that are very amusing, although it's abundantly clear Kristoff is heterosexual and in love with Anna. I also absolutely love the charade sequence, particularly when Olaf made fun of the way Elsa walked in Let It Go, or even later in the film when Elsa made fun of herself. It was also a great scene, a little reminiscent of the bonding stuff Joss Whedon wrote for the after-party scene in Avengers Age of Ultron. Simple bonding moments where characters you like just talk to each other are often far better than the more important stuff a film focuses on. Also, the way Olaf recaps the first Frozen is hilarious, but I also liked how he did the same thing for Frozen 2 in the post-credit sequence. I liked even more that the post-credit sequence had a reference to Frozen Fever, which establishes that the spin-off sketches really exist in the same universe as the big theatrically released films. That's important to me since I'm a big fan of continuity. Another small element of continuity I liked was when Anna recognized the general from the painting she'd seen on the walls, which is a great callback to what we know about Anna's childhood, and it just makes total sense. All in all, I was pretty disappointed with Frozen 2, a film I was really hoping would be a solid continuation of the franchise. After watching, I couldn't help feeling like they could have done better given that they had 5 years, allowing for marketing and a time break between films, to make a really good movie. Some of the dialogue felt sloppy and the direction of the story felt forced or unnecessary, although admittedly the first Frozen technically spent 80 years in development, which is quite a bit longer to bring a great story together. Ultimately, it seems to me that no matter how much time they had, it would have been really hard to make a story with as much emotional center as the first Frozen, which is not to say I was expecting the movie to be bad. As I said, I was very excited for it and I went in with positive impressions. But this is a problem for any movie that is made as a sequel to a self-contained story, and many sequels struggle to recapture the heart of what made the first one great. The simple fact is that Anna and Elsa and Kristoff's arcs were basically over after the first film, and there really wasn't anywhere their characters needed to go or gaps they needed to fill in their lives. While I admire the attempt from the screenwriters, musicians, and the whole crew, an attempt which was obviously inevitable for business reasons, it simply doesn't manage to accomplish what it sets out to do, unless what it sets out to do is make a buttload of money. It did do that. What I will say for the film is that it looked gorgeous, really solid animation work and design. At least Frozen 2 is not ugly to look at. And as always, Kristen Bell and the voice cast did a great job with what they were given.